when you're interviewing people, you can't say it on the spot. Do you hire the person with the expectation you're going to be able to convince him later to change his dress code ways and kind of spruce up? Or, you know, because I think people lose out on jobs simply because they just don't have it together in how they present, but they might be really intelligent and have great skills. How do you address it?
Well, I had an actual experience in that. We had an opportunity to interview 3 people for a job. The person that really had the most skills and experience was the one that was dressed the least professional. We had a function one evening. It was a black tie function, and the individual showed up in a sweater and tie. The next work day, I took the individual down, didn't say anything, and just said, wanted you to kind of get an idea of what I expect. And I went in and I bought the person a blazer, a couple pairs of pants, a shirt, and a tie. And I think it's a matter of mentoring, and that person got it, and that person is an outstanding individual and productive employee, and the individual talked to me a couple of years later and said, you really did me a big favor. Thank you.
I think most people who come to an interview try to dress as professionally as maybe they know how.
Now, that's the key, as they know how.
I enjoy and I respect those companies that have those programs, Dress for Success. And I like the word you use, mentoring, because sometimes back in my day, when you went to an interview, you had on the black skirt and the black blazer, and you wore pantyhose, and you wore close-in, you wore a little pearl. It was just a regiment, a list of things. Nowadays, that doesn't happen because things have changed. So we have to understand what is acceptable and what isn't. And then once we interview, if that person is qualified, can we work with them? Can we really mentor them? And I think that's what it's about. When people come into your place of business, we want people to rise, and then all the tides rise. And we have to find ways to communicate personally and be for real with people and say, is it anything that you need help with? Or, you know, maybe we'd all like to dress not as rich or as well, or Rolex or whatever, but at least understand the basics of, we're not wearing mini skirts and halters and our backs out. You know, there's just, she's laughing.
We've all seen that.
We've seen it, but we have to model it. Also, we have to model our communication, model the way we want our workforce to be, and mentor. I like that word.
If I could just comment real quick on that too, I think people need to realize what's going on in America today. There are people who are still struggling desperately. You don't know if they're wearing their last decent shirt that they own, or you don't know if they're wearing their last decent blouse that they own. You don't know. So I would challenge us to look beyond that and immediate. And I'm not saying, again, we all have the expectation meter, we all set it, we all communicate with people. But right now, it's still a struggle for some people. And especially with clothing. I know myself, I've talked to a professional networking group here through Center for Workforce Innovation, and was talking to a group of mature people. And a woman in the audience asked me, should I color my hair? And I said, well, personally, I don't think you should. But if you want to make yourself more youthful in the eyes of employers, might not be a bad idea. She had been asking and talking with other friends about that. She did it. She immediately got a job within the month after we had that meeting. And I think it's your whole appearance. But you have to be careful about where people are economically at the moment. And this may be their hope to change that. So again, we need to be.
And it all comes back
to come on board in terms of a plan for hiring for minorities, so that there's a level of accountability that all corporations in Northwest Indiana can aspire to. My concern is that if you say, how does it look that my particular corporation would hire somebody in that particular scenario, that's a naive assumption, because I mean, individual corporations, if they're acting individually, they're going to act in their best interest. They're not going to act in the interest of the region. How would you respond to that?
But focusing on like manager and above to ensure that we have diverse representation, and we've done some of those things. But what I will tell you is I do believe that corporations act in their best interest, but that best interest isn't mutually exclusive, just in their own right. I think that the interest of an organization can also benefit the community itself. So I think there's some, instead of being selfish, I think there's some self-interest that both corporations here in Northwest Indiana as well as the community share. I'll tell you, at NiSource and NIPSCO, we want the very best and the very brightest. If they're male, female, black, white, whatever, I mean, we want to attract the very best and brightest. Does that cause us to recruit folks here locally? Yes. Does it also cause us to cast maybe a wider net and recruit people to good old Northwest Indiana who maybe haven't grown up here? Absolutely. So I would agree with you. I think we are working through some things, and I do think it is a little naive to think that there aren't some systemic things that do exist in industries. We'll be the first one to tell you that we haven't always shared this, I think, mindset that we have now, that we want to be diverse. However, I don't want that to be the sole reason that we don't try to make progress. I think based on senior leadership, our president and CEO of NiSource is a white male. He's the first one to tell you, engaged, diverse, safe employees is one of the very first things in terms of his, we call it Bob's Big Six, but they're his 6 priorities for the organization. NiSource as a whole, that's number 1. Diverse, safe, engaged employees.
And Jodi, just recent.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of companies besides NIPSCO in Northwest Indiana, right? I'm just speaking for
And just recently in March, the Urban League of Northwest Indiana held a diversity award and inclusion luncheon. It brought a lot of people to the table during that luncheon to actually look at their workforce in the community and how they give back. And we presented some awards there, and I believe that was the initial outreach for a lot of companies, a lot of organizations to look at what they're doing. And we're not saying that we're there yet, but we're working on it. We also have a race relations council that's been active throughout the community even before my time, and I believe what you're referring to is maybe the codes of inclusiveness that maybe was done a long time ago. We're bringing that back to the table. You'll be hearing more from Race Relations Council and Urban League in those areas. We're still working on arriving. We have not arrived yet, and in order for us to get to that point, we need to look around our companies and see who's on our board of directors, who's on the top management. Is that diverse? And if it's not, who's willing to step out and make that change and start talking about some things that we need to do? So the culture will grow as we are open to grow and as we are willing to take a real good look at crossing those lines. I cross the lines all the time. I go to LaPorte and I love it. And I hope people will come over to Lake and that we will stop saying, well, that's Porter County. Well, that's Lake County. Well, that's LaPorte. We're all working for the same goal, to work together and move our organizations forward. And we're all working towards having a better understanding of culture and diversity if we talk about it.
And I'm interpreting culture more, and I'll let you talk a minute, is at least the way that I see it written about quite often is more of the environment, what you said at the start, friendly, welcome, whereas some companies, we've all been to a company where we might describe them as kind of uptight, I mean, seriously, or very formal. I look at Lakeshore and certainly news as much more casual, because news, we encounter so much, we have to talk about so many subjects. It's not just work. Whereas in a company that makes widgets, you're talking about widgets a lot. Our widgets are everyone in this room and every company you work for and every dog you've ever owned and every fire you've ever gone to. So we tend to be more casual in our conversation. But I look at culture as environment, which is the context somewhat of that question. But you're saying it's something bigger, is it?
Well, it's bigger, and I'm going to give this to you. When people come into the Urban League office, usually they come because they have a need. They're looking for a job, they're looking for employment. All of us want our children to go to a school environment, and you want to work in a work environment. It doesn't matter who you are. It matters that we are welcoming to you when you walk into that office. So I feel that if the senator comes in, I tell my front line, you stop what you're doing, You look at that person and you greet them. Good morning, Senator. How are you? How may I help you? But if the child or the woman comes in with purple, green, and red hair and 5 babies, you stop what you're doing and you look at that person and you smile and you say, good morning, how may I help you? And if that elderly person comes in and it takes them 20 minutes to get from that door to the chair, you may need to stop what you're doing and go around and help that person. So I'm just talking about the way we should be in our culture, open, receiving, familiar.
Manager calling this male adult boy. Now he was smart enough not to get angry and simply approach her. They talked out, he said to me, she's not racist. I know this, I really like her, I respect her. She's from the South and this was an expression that she was used to using. So, anyone have an opinion of this and how to deal with it if it happens?
I think it depends on the context of the conversation. Usually when I'm saying, hey girl, I'm at home or I'm on the telephone, I'm not in the office saying, hey girl. That's more of a personal connotation. So in the office, I feel that we need to be respectful, but in any time we think that we may be saying something out of line or could be thought of out of line, I think it's always proper just to ask, did I offend you? Did I say something that maybe I should not have said? And if so, apologize. But I think it's always good to communicate and then ask, but hey girl, not in the office.
Just to build a little bit off of what Vanessa said, I tend to agree. I think there's a level of familiarity that often certain slang or vernacular lends itself to. I think in an office environment, though, it's probably better to be a little more professional than overly familiar because you don't know if you might offend someone. So oftentimes I think it's a matter of intent versus impact, and even though you might have maybe not a negative intention, you might impact the person adversely. So again, I think it's kind of weighing the situation. I think as the person who's receiving the term either boy or girl, having that courage enough to say, wait a minute, you know, can I pull you aside? That's something I prefer that you not refer to me. My name's Chris, or my name's Vanessa. But also I think there's courage that needs to be reciprocated on the person who's receiving the feedback.
I love that answer because the problem, I've got 2 mics. The problem is that people often don't speak up and it festers, right? Isn't that what happens most of the time? Is that somebody received the information and they don't say something? Because I would be the first to absolutely bow down and apologize if I hurt someone's feelings. Because I am a baby boomer and you don't do that. That's just really uncool. You don't insult people. And when I said that to her, I really meant it as a compliment. And also, I think part of it is in my head, so many of the people who work for me are so young. They are much younger than me. And it's not that I don't think of her as a young woman, but good girl is a way to relate and let her know I'm behind you. But I appreciate when someone speaks up before it gets to HR, because you don't want it to get to HR, right? Seriously. But I mean, isn't that really what we want to avoid? We don't want this to get to HR. We want to be able to, exactly as Jean's video showed, work on some conflict resolution and address these things so that we can have a diverse workplace and not have clashing all the time between people.
Think about how we interact with our employees. Once a year, as a formal sit-down, just doesn't cut it.
Great advice. All right, well, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank our panelists, Rex, Joseph, Vanessa, and Chris. I so appreciate your being here and your input. Makes a big difference to hear it from other professionals. And thank all of you for coming. I want to thank you.